Well, hello there. I am Kimberly HayDay Muga.
And I'm Amanda Day.
And you are listening to Fundraising HayDay,
where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
And how we can all do a better job. Everybody, please, all of us together, all do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy.
And a big shout out and thank you to our Patreon subscribers who make this podcast possible. To join this amazing community with monthly playlists, a book club, and wide open mistakes were made episodes, as well as Kimberly's monthly musings, visit patreon.com/fundraisinghayday.
Calm down, y'all. So if you've been looking to level up your grant skills on your own schedule, on your own time, when you want to do it, not at the mercy of someone else's dropping, recording, appearance, plane travel schedule, check out our on-demand courses. HayDay Services on demand. We have 12 module grant writing and 12 module grant management courses. Each module, believe it or not, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, thank you and welcome back. If you're just joining us, hi, we talk a lot. But these are just little condensed nuggets of goodness. And they're usually 20 to 30 minutes each. So perfect for that after work walk, or you're folding laundry, or if you're in Atlanta, you're just driving to some place that was supposed to be 5 minutes away. It's actually 20 to 30 because traffic. Concise information. You can buy one at a time. And if you buy one, it's like $19.99, right? Or you can buy the whole series of either one or both courses. Each full course is $197. So check us out, haydayservices.com/shop.
Yeah, and if you're a member of the Grant Professionals Association, mosey on over to their website with all their member benefits list, because as a member, you get 25% off all of our on-demand courses through the end of 2026. So check that out.
We're even giving you 25% off $19.99. I mean, come on.
There you go.
Come on.
So
it's a deal.
It is a great deal. Now, again, thank you for being here with us today. We are doing an episode that's one I've been wanting to talk about for a while, because it's just so real and relatable for anyone who has ever written a grant, whether you're a consultant or an employee or a pro bono grant writer. It doesn't matter. This is something, if you have written one grant, you're going to relate to this topic.
We're talking about the information chase, the search for information. Please, Lord, can you give me that budget? Hi, hello. What is it that you want to write this grant about? Because we have to write it about something. And I have experienced this recently. I'll experience it again. I've experienced it in the past, that feeling. Here comes the deadline, and the proposal is feeling a little half-assed, because you don't have all the information. And the people who really were wanting this grant and agreed to do it and thought it was marvelous, they've ghosted you, as the children used to say, because not usually because they're mean people. In fact, I've never encountered that. It's because there's so many other things going on, but they're gone, and you're faced with this, and you know that it's a competitive world out there for grant seeking, and you really do need to have your act together when you send out grants. Not you always had to, but I think now even more with all the uncertainty. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the truth is everybody wants the money, but nobody wants to stop what they're doing to give you the information so you can get them the money, because they're busy.
So what we want to do today is offer up some practical, real world advice, the good, the bad, the ugly, no judgment here, so that you can get a really good, tight, competitive, compelling proposal out the door without losing your mind or burning yourself out because you're having to stay up all night because people didn't get you the information in time. So that's where we are.
Y'all, we are so very excited to introduce our listeners to the first Season 9 sponsor of the Fundraising HayDay podcast. Grant Guru is the world's largest aggregator of grants and funding, and this incredible prospect research tool has made its way all the way from Australia to the United States. It's a searchable database that is updated daily, and it is so user-friendly. We're joined today by Adrian Spencer, co-founder and director of Grant Guru, to learn more about this incredible product, with a mini-series during the first 12 episodes of this season.
So, Adrienne, when most people talk about grants, certainly when Amanda and I talk about grants, the focus is going to be on government agencies and nonprofits, right? Those are the main folks seeking grants. But Grant Guru also focuses on grant funding to assist for-profit businesses to help them secure grants. Can you just tell us a little more about how that works?
Yeah, spot on. It's actually a bit of an overlooked area. Most for-profit businesses think grants are for nonprofits or universities, but we list over 8,000 grants and incentives for businesses. So we actually have three markets. We support nonprofits, we support for-profit businesses, and we support government agencies because there's grants and funding for all of them. And this actually has a unique advantage because there's an interesting interplay between all three. For example, we've seen a business secure funding to build a health clinic, which is then run by a nonprofit, or vice versa. And so we know that collaboration is key to many a successful grant application. So bringing everything together makes sense. We notice that also people in the business world are often involved in their local nonprofit as a volunteer, all the way through to board members. And there's this significant crossover. So having everything in one place, it's easier to find what you're after for whoever you represent.
That's a really good point. And we often get questions from businesses that are really interested in securing grants. And that's not a specialty area of ours. So it's great to partner up with someone who is so deeply explored that. So thanks. Find out more about this fantastic new resource for grant seekers. Visit grantguru.com/US. You get access to a user-friendly search engine, email alerts, grants calendar, customizable grant reports, and so much more.
And as an added bonus, Grant Guru is providing our listeners with 20% off their subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, use the discount code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963. Okay, let's just name the reality first. Why is it so hard to get information from people who genuinely want to get the grant? Why, Kimberly? Why?
I think there are several different reasons. I'll start out with a basic one. I feel like most people outside of development department, or you may not even have a development department like you didn't as a local government person. You were like the grants party of one. They just have no idea what goes into a larger size grant. I'm not talking about the $1,000 grants from Walmart stores that everybody writes for at the end of the year. Yeah. By everybody, I mean small to medium sized nonprofits. There are a lot of different parts and pieces, and there's a level of specificity that I think people who have never worked with grants before don't quite understand. Like maybe you came up in fundraising, so you would have, you might test different email messages. I mean, you should, right? If you're writing to individual donors, but you're not developing an individual message for each of your donors involved in an email campaign, right? They're probably getting maybe anywhere from 1 to 4 different messages sent out just to see which one tests higher. So you're not having to answer a series of basically short essay questions or long essay questions over and over again in different ways for different grants. So I think a lot of it is, you got to have a full narrative. You got to have outcome data. There needs to be a budget that makes sense, that exists, and that you can use. And usually for state and federal and larger private foundations, a budget narrative where you're explaining what it is. And someone has to do all that, and you can't make it up. Well, I guess you could, but I think that's really not the way to go.
No, not when whoever signs that application is attesting that everything inside of it is true and accurate to the best of their ability and knowledge.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying here is that most people, they don't see that iceberg. They see the tip. They know there's a grant due and it's got a deadline, but they don't understand all that is entailed.
And I mean, you could make the argument, maybe why should they? And now, when I first started out, I was like, how dare you? Now I'm like, I think that's kind of part of my job. to make sure that people do understand, right? I don't think I know it's part of my job. And so again, as I said earlier, I don't think it's because anybody's like, I know we're going to mess with Kimberly HayDay Muga's head. We're going to mess with Amanda Day. We're going to make them stay up all night because we just like to think of them toiling all night while we're, sleeping the sleep of the innocent. I really don't think that's what's going on. I think they're just busy with day to day. As particularly, I'll speak for nonprofit because that's where I worked for nonprofit agencies all my working life before I started my business, except for one brief stint in a corporate job too. Anyway, most of my life, and it's everybody's expected to do more with less. It's a real nonprofit cultural phenomenon that is not helpful, where it's like, well, we'll just keep doing more and more and more. It's okay because we're in it for and so you'll have people wearing multiple hats, multiple things. I work with clients to this day that's how they function, and that's just the way it is. So I think that really contributes a lot to their inability to have the time or the interest.
Yeah, well, and I'm pretty sure I've told this story at some point on the podcast before, but I had a council member walk into my office once, and when he saw my giant whiteboard with the list of all the grants I was managing, he was like, man, you really are busy. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I'm at council meetings at least once a month presenting grants we're applying for. I always send emails when we get grants. I always send emails out when we finish products. So it's not like they don't know that we are constantly churning out grants and managing grants. And I'm thinking, you get a lot of information. If you, as the council member who I talk to on a regular basis, are just now realizing I'm really busy. Of course, my colleagues who don't get those reports and those emails probably don't get it, right? No.
Also, I think people are just maybe intimidated by it. And it's just easy when you're uncomfortable about something to push it away and say, I'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm going to have to write something. I'm not a writer. I don't know what, I'm just not going to answer this email.
Yeah. True story. So all of this is just very human. Even if it's the worst possible outcome, grant writers that I know who are the least stressed, they have built what I would call a living grant library, right? So they have shared folders that hold the building blocks of almost every proposal, right? The organization's history, program descriptions, biographies of key staff, financials, both for programs and their overall budget, and they understand where their matches may come from if they have a match requirement or cost share requirement, as the lingo is now. They've got outcome data and testimonials and all of the things, and they make sure that all this information is updated on a regular basis, not just when they're under a deadline crunch, right? So now that doesn't mean you have everything, but if you can at least have those building blocks, that means that there's less you're trying to scramble and collect between that grant opening and that deadline, however long you've got there, right?
It's a beautiful thing when people put it in place. It takes away a lot of the starting from scratch. I'm working with a client now where I am filling in as they are hiring a full-time sort of grant manager position, so not an entry-level position. Yeah. So I'm supporting their lead grants person during the transition process. And it's just a thing of beauty that all the folders set up, past grants, reference points, reports, attachments, everything. It makes my consulting work so much easier to just have that. She's kind of done that, she's done that heavy lifting of moving things forward and keeping things going. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I tend to work with other clients on a more longer term basis. And part of that is always holding up that grants calendar to keep things moving forward so that there are no surprises. I found that there's the living grant library, but then I would also suggest bringing in hey, this is the update, even if it's just pulling like the 3 months at a time, or even 2 months at a time, depending on how busy they are and what's going on, to just go, hey, here's some things coming up. Can we get ahead of some of this? Can we move some things around? I try so hard to eliminate surprises from grant work. I mean, there are always surprises and sometimes opportunities pop up that are really great, but just whatever we can do to push that forward. And this is why grant writing is the wrong name. I think it should be grant development, because so much of this is really not writing, it's anticipating and trying to move things forward. Then that helps get that information from folks because you're working a little further in advance, just to not have some of those surprises.
Yeah. And, and information isn't just with grant writing, but grant management as well. And so no matter what
That's true.
you're trying to get from your folks, it's important to explain why it matters, not just to be like, I have to have this by Tuesday, right? But, you don't want to be guilt trippy, but maybe explain, hey, we could get, maybe you're in the middle of a grant now and saying, hey, we could get this grant for another year to continue funding your after school program. But to do that, we've got to manage this one well. And the funder needs your Q3 attendance data by Thursday to meet the deadlines that we all have. So you're connecting the dots of like, this is why we need the information now, and this is how it's going to help us in the future. And so, I've done that a lot, like explain like, look, this isn't me. If it was up to me, they would just give us the money and we could do all of our good works and there wouldn't be any to jump through. But the reality is, if we want to keep funding it through this grant, we've got to do this and we've got to think about this in the future. And that usually, because then it's kind of like, we've talked about this before, right? You're blaming the funder. Not that I want people to be mad at the funder, but like, I'm like, look, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just trying to get you the funds. And so because the funder needs it, this is the hoops we have to jump through. And if they say we can't, or we don't, okay, then maybe this isn't the funding source. So let's talk about what is
the funding. Absolutely.
Because maybe the grant isn't the answer. There's a few times we've gotten some grants where we've realized it's not worth it, right? The amount of time it took us to put together the proposal, the amount of time we spent managing it. Afterwards, we're like, you know what? That $20,000, while sounded amazing because it funded this important aspect of what we were doing, not worth it because of all the time and effort it took. So let's look for alternatives, So
yeah, if it was a $20,000 grant, but it cost you $14,000 to manage it over a year between everyone's time and reporting effort, then that's really not worth it. I'm working with a client now that's decided a couple of years ago not to go back to a county in the Atlanta area, a county in which I live, because they found that the money was diminishing, but the reporting requirements were ratcheting up. And they were like, I think we're going to be better served trying to get a larger grant with another funder than investing the hours and hours and hours and prepping the grant and then in post-award management. So yeah, it does happen. You are so good at this consistently across everything, and that's building relationships, just reaching out and building relationships. Normally, you and I talk about this a lot in our trainings or our keynotes or whatever, where we're building relationships with the funder. A lot of what we train about can be externally focused with good reason, but you can use those same techniques internally as well. And just with me, it was building relationships with the finance team, particularly around grant management, but also when pre-award, because you want the people that handle the budget and the money all the time. You want them to come in and go, hey, don't forget about this, or no, we've changed our benefits package and now it's X% instead of Y%, or just having them in that process. But building that relationship and maybe doing a little, hey, this is how grants work. Let's work together to get more money kind of thing. And you're really good at that. You over the years, you'll pick up the phone, you'll go visit. I think you even have lunch and learns for internal folks, all kinds of things.
It took me a while to figure out, like, it's kind of like everybody's working. Their favorite way to work and operate and share information really does differ. I will tell you one of the very first grant I ever wrote for a police department. It was for some equipment, and it was like an equipment only grant. So pretty straightforward. I think there were like 10 questions. And several of the things I knew because I'd been working at that city for about over a year at that point. So, they wanted to know like your organization's purpose. They wanted to know about your community. They wanted to know some information about your police department, some pretty boilerplate information, right? So that stuff, I was like, oh, I got that. I can write this all day long. This is great. This will be easy. But then when they started asking some specific questions about the equipment we wanted, and I don't even remember now what the equipment was, but of course, I've never been a police officer. I have no idea what a blah, blah, blah does and why they need it. And so I just emailed a copy of the application to the officer I was working with and was like, hey, I'm working on this, excited to try and get this money for you. But like questions 3, 5, and 6, I don't know the answers to. Can you share that with me? And that freaked him out because, his literal response was, but that's grant writing and I'm not a grant writer. That's what you do, right? Because of course he's thinking what he's going to send me is what I'm going to copy and paste. And he's like, he was worried about, which fair. And so I ended up going to his desk and I was like, hey, sorry, didn't mean to scare you off. I said, why don't we just talk about this? So I said, just tell me, explain to me why you need this equipment, which was like question number 3, basically, right? So he does, and I just jot down a note. And then I literally asked the questions, and he gave me beautiful answers because he knows his stuff, right? He's the subject matter expert. But the thought of like him emailing it really wigged him out. And so that was my first clue of like, okay, I may have to differ. And I have some folks I've worked with that they're happy to email the information because they can do it quicker and they like it. I found I had some that liked for me to come to their office and sit down and talk to them about it. I had a girl I worked with that she would always, anytime I'd say, hey, we need to meet to talk about this project, she'd always be like, well, can we go to lunch first? And then we'd go somewhere to lunch and then we'd stay and sit there and get it done. She finally, one day she was like, thank you for being willing to do this. But she's like, because if I'm at my desk, I've got my phone ringing, I've got people coming into my office, and here I can give you my full attention. This is the easiest way for me to work. So for now on, anytime we had a grant that I worked on with her, I just knew, okay, what's my first available lunch date, and let's go to lunch, and I'll get everything usually in one shot from her, right? Just a 2 to 3 hour lunch. And I would explain to my boss, like, yes, I know you think I'm just going to lunch, but this is what's happening. And he was like, whatever you got to do. So thankfully,
exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah, and that's what it is. As if you're the grant writer, it really is whatever you've got to do to get the information. And so rather than trying to force people into this is my method of how I want to do it, I was just like, what works best for you? And I will accommodate that, So, and a lot of it too, I worked in City Hall, which at the time, our City Hall only had like mayor and council and administration and some finance people, and HR was in City Hall. So it was looked at as like this, like, that's where the important people are, right? So half the time, nobody wanted to come to City Hall because they felt like they were, I don't know, going to be judged or they might run into the mayor and have to speak to him, and that would freak him out, which is crazy because he was the nicest man on the planet. So it was usually me going to them. But again, whatever I had to do to get the information, reasonably, of course. I wasn't like, sure, I'll meet you at 7:00 at night and we'll take care of this, but
yeah.
Within reason, what you can do to get the information. And sometimes it's just as simple as asking, like, hey, you're the subject matter expert. I'm going to need you to explain some things to me, which I've learned also works better than going, I need you to answer some grant questions, because they're like, no, I don't know.
100%, because they are.
I just need to talk to you about your project so I have a better handle on it so I can write about it well. What works best? Can I email you questions? Do you want to meet up? Does lunch work? You tell me and we'll make it happen. And, inevitably I may have to email or have a phone call follow up because you never get everything the first go round, especially on a big grant. But again, it goes back to just figuring out what they're comfortable with so you can get what you need to get the job done. So
it's about understanding someone's communication style and adjusting yourself because to theirs, instead of, well, they won't fill out this form and they want to, what will they do? Because this is not a perfect world. And then you can build those. But I know you've had this happen before. What happens when someone just goes radio silent?
Then it's, so if they, if I've got a follow-up question or maybe they didn't answer something, usually then it is an email or a phone call going, hey, just a reminder. Now I will say something too. I normally never told anybody the grant deadline because the reality is people always wait, and I'm guilty of this too. You wait till the last minute to submit to do something. So I needed information way before then. So I was often giving like, hey, if I'd follow up with an email, I need this by this date. And I would always build in wiggle room because people are busy and forget. So like, if they didn't respond to it initially, I would reach out again with an email, maybe even a phone call. If it was easy, if they're in the same building as me, sometimes I would just stop by their desk, be like, hey, I hate to hound, but I'm under deadline. Can I get this? And if they're still not answering, or if they're not, or maybe they are answering, I've had before where someone did answer all my questions, but it was such technical gobbledygook to me that I tried asking the same question 3 times and I never understood the answer. It was for an IT related grant. That's, then I usually am going to their boss going, hey, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but I am under deadline and I need this information. Can you, I don't know what's going on, but I need you at this step in and make it happen. And sometimes that was a matter of them just giving me the information. And so that was easier. Other times it was a matter of them being like, I'll make sure it gets to you. And I don't know what they say or do behind the scenes, but then I get the information, So, and I will say too, something else I always did, just because I think it's fair anyway, but also I'm smart and I know it helps me. Once I submit a grant application, I would always send an email to mayor and council and to the city manager, and then whatever department head. So if I was working for a police grant, it was the police chief. If I was working for an engineering grant, it was the engineering and public works director, right? I would always copy all of them on it and say, hey, this grant has been submitted. I couldn't have done it without the help of, and name everybody who, whether they answered one question for me, answered 30 questions, provided a document, whatever. Because first of all, I think credit should go where it's due, right? Because I can't do my job without all these people. But also, I think that goes a long way to kind of, if they're like, man, she really hounded me for information, but then they see, oh, but she's not taking all the credit. So that, I think that helped earn me a lot of goodwill, that people usually were very willing to continue to help me because they know I was happy to share the the reward, share the assistance, right? So
it's it's common sense, because grant writing is not a solo sport, and so there are people, and it's positive reinforcement for people who do move, even if the process was a little tricky. But yeah, I totally agree too. Looping in the ED is not like I'm snitching, I'm tattling. It's more like, if you want this money, this is how this money works. And I have even joked, but not joked with people. I'm like, if you don't give me this information, I'm going to write for another program, because, I mean, whether or not it was a particularly nice thing to say, but I'm also like, y'all, you say you want this money. That's also a tactic I've used in grant management. You don't spend it down, we don't get another grant. But I joke. I'll joke about it and bring it up, but I'm also deadly serious. It's like, if it's not a good fit, given everything that's going on, then let's pursue another way. Maybe there is maybe part of the proceeds from your fundraising gala or your walkathon or whatever can go to this. Maybe there can be email or Giving Tuesday or something like that. If it's just not working. Also, please, everyone, normalize this. Document who has responded to you and who didn't respond. Just keep that list, because then when you're debriefing either with the department head or with the you just need to have a record.
Yeah.
If it's particularly egregious. If you're having to nudge somebody twice, that's just a Tuesday afternoon. But if they're just consistently uncooperative, and you're being pushed perhaps by your boss or by the head of the agency where you're working to get this information, then do yourself a favor and go, here's what happened, here are the emails, here are these things. It rarely comes to this, but it has a couple of times for me in the past. And it's like, let's either have another contact person, or, work with another program for a little while, or let's do some training together. Let's do something.
Yeah. Well, and I will say too, I was very fortunate that for the most part, they were free to let me choose what projects to work on. Now, obviously, occasionally things would be like, hey, we've got to get this road. Well, I'm going to have to write a grant for that road. And no matter who I have to work with, I got to figure it out. But for the most part, I was pretty flexible. And so what usually ended up happening is I'd work with someone, they were difficult to deal with, not because they were horrible, but they just slow to respond. And sometimes I'd have to get their boss looped in. And so the next time they would come to me with like, hey, here's some other things I'd like. Well, if it's between them and I only have time to do one, and between them and someone who I work with and they're a breeze, I'm going to choose them. And they take notice. They're like, hey, you still haven't even come, why haven't you found a grant for me yet? And I'll tell them, like, because I've been busy with these other things, and they're easier to work with. And a lot of times people would take that, oh, and it was like gauntlet thrown. And so then they were like, okay, I'll do better next time. So we tried, and sure enough, they did, because they realized that and again, that's because my boss gave me the wherewithal and the ability to understand I only have so many hours in my day. They weren't expecting me to be writing 40 federal grants a year and managing 40 federal grants a year. So I had some autonomy in that. And I know not every grant professional has that. Sometimes you're told you're going to do this and you're going to do this, which is why what Kimberly said is so important about documenting how many times you're having to reach out to people, what information you're not getting that you're having to kind of, to the best of your, and I don't mean make stuff up as in you're lying, but you're like, okay, this is true, but it's not as strong a proposal because I didn't have the best information I could have had, right? And so documenting that to be able to say, this is a problem. So either we need to fix it or I need to be writing grants for other people. So, and I will say too, I think there's a difference sometimes too between clients and coworkers, right? Like I found it much easier because we're kind of on the same, we're in the same office. I see them all the time. You build up a camaraderie. It was much easier to nudge coworkers than it is to nudge clients, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're not happy with your services, whatever they're not happy with, you could lose a client, right? And so it is a little more awkward. And I'm in that right now. I've got a client, they've got a new executive director. He's not giving me the information I've asked for multiple times, not just on one particular grant, but data I need to write any grant for them. And I'm in this awkward position right now of like, okay, I've asked for this more than 5 times. And he keeps saying, I'll get to it this week. I'll get to it this week. So what's my recourse? And, so like do I go to the board and let them know what's going on? At some point I'm going to have to, but that's awkward to like, it's a lot different than going to like, hey, it's my colleague's director. It's the ED that I know really well versus jumping up to go into as a consultant, go into a board. So it can be, I think it's much harder when you're not getting information from clients because you're not as present. And you don't know as many of the players to know who to reach out to. Do you agree with that, Kimberly?
Well, once again, I think you're the nice one between the two of us because I'm like, if I'm asking 5 freaking times for some basic stuff and I'm not getting it, they're not getting money. And also I'm not working, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you have a retainer with that client, you're not so I'm like, I think it might be time to bless and release, or if it's a retainer and I am getting, regular revenue from them, but they're not giving me the information I need, then I think it is time to talk things through or go, renegotiate or decide, what now may not be the best time for y'all to work on grants with me. I totally get it. And find someone else, because in the end, if it's a consulting relationship, and the information's not coming out, you're not going to get grants for them anyway. The grants won't be good because you're sort of fudging things. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Not lying about things, but not fully answering the questions. I'm not saying lie about anything, but I'm like, if there are 5 parts to that question and you could only have information for 3 of those 5 parts, and you send in the grant, when you're sending it in, maybe the grant gods will shine upon me, but I'm not setting anybody up for success. So anyway, it's tricky. I think also I would add to that, that building relationships thing, not only with clients, but also if you are gathering, whether it's for grant management or grant writing, gathering success stories or lessons learned from program participants or other partners, that will almost always take longer, but there are ways around that, like just gathering stories not just your job. They're usually, if in a larger agencies, certainly there's always a marketing department, there's a marketing and communications or PR or wherever it might be, advertising, whatever they're calling it. And I realize those are all different things, but a lot of times they get lumped together. And nonprofit communications. So they are probably gathering marketing stories anyway. So working with the team, letting staff know that you also need that, letting your marketing writers or other team members know, or with your clients, it's like, let's bring marketing into this. Are there stories for the annual report that then we can use throughout the year? And just bringing that up because as either the consultant or the team employee, that you will be asked for those things, particularly in grant management. I was going to say for private, but no, it's public and private funding. They want to know lessons learned and challenges and all those kinds of things. Yes, you got to document how the money's spent. Yes, you got to track those program outcomes, but invariably, and they should. I mean, I don't fault them for wanting to know some individual stories. Making sure that there's some sort of consent built into that, particularly if you're working with programs that serve children or people who there might be HIPAA reasons or other security reasons. You want to gather this respectfully, but and I know that it's ongoing. So let's just address it head on and get other people involved that maybe are more boots on the ground collecting those stories or interacting anyway. And that's usually your program managers and supervisors, and then people in marketing and PR. Yep. Where you can just, let's get ahead of this. We know it's coming. Let's get ahead of it. And it's perfectly okay in my book to use the same, if the stories fit what different funders are asking within the same fiscal year, right? Yep. I try to just every fiscal year, let's change it up. But it's like, unless they're wanting something very specific, and by they, I mean the funders, either in their application or grant management, I will recycle the stories. I might have a longer story, and then I choose from it what fits in with the character or word limits of each grant proposal or report. And I just use those 2 or 3 stories over and over again during that year.
Yes, I do the same.
And then start again.
I think that's great. And sometimes I'll even bring back a story because, especially a lot of times the stories will highlight different things. And sometimes I may grab a story from 5 years ago because it directly ties to the exact type of program we're writing for. Yeah. And I'm like, because again, stories you don't have to say, well, yesterday this happened. We can just say we had a client and this is, so don't feel like you could only use stories for a year. If it's relevant, I think you can go back and grab older stories.
Well, if you're writing to the same funder, which a lot of times I have done, then I change them up. But you're right. You can, we're grown folks. We can figure out what works best, but building that early on and just setting the expectation that, this is what we need. We know we need this. Just like, you're going to need your 501c3 letter. Let's don't scramble around. Let's just know that you're going to need some success stories and lessons learned, and just build that into maybe checking in regularly with your folks in particular program or project, or with your marketing folks or your clients that do that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So we've talked about working with your colleagues, working with clients. We also need to think about working with external partners, right? Because oftentimes maybe you're taking the lead and there's 6 of you and you're kind of all equal partners, or maybe you are the applicant, but you're working, maybe someone's providing some volunteers or space for your program or whatever it is. But you want to make sure it's not only like, hey, can you provide this space for this program? But it's like, what all does that entail and mean, right? It's not just that they're providing the space for you to use it, but they're probably going to have to sign some sort of MOU that spells all of that out for you to include with your application. Is there something that they're going to have to provide on the management side of the grant to help you do all of your reporting? So you want to be clear and upfront in your communication from the get-go of, hey, I'd like to partner with you on this grant, but this is what it's going to mean during the grant period, what I'm going to need from you, and this is what it's going to mean during the 1, 3, 5, or however long that grant period is. And then having that MOU in place that spells out everything, so no one can come back later and go, well, I didn't know. And it's also helpful too, no matter how long your grant period is, key players may come and go, right? So you don't want to have one executive director who's like, sure, no problem, and you've worked with them before and you think, they always do what they say. Well, what if they leave and there's a new executive director, or they've got a new board? So you want to have that MOU in place that's, a kind of a binding, like, hey, your organization has agreed to do this, no matter who's in charge or who's at the table, right? So that's
just good business.
It is. It's smart to do that.
A quick note: I've preached about this many a time, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. But also, when you're looking for information for larger grants, they'll want either, as you just said, an MOU or an MOA, memorandum of agreement, or they might want a letter of commitment or a letter of support, and they all have different things. But if you are starting out, you've gotten this grant, you're ready to get started on it, go ahead and read it all the way through, the RFP all the way through. And if there's any letters at all, whether it's an MOU, any documents at all that you cannot control, that you are not developing yourself, those go out first. And that includes letters of support. You may write them yourself and ask people to review them and sign them. That's perfectly acceptable. Yeah. But also, if you're not the person that owns that relationship, get with the person that does early on in the grant development process and have that be one of their first tasks is, let's get on these letters. Here's a sample. Let's get on it, and get it out, because that can take a long time.
And if you're like, oh, I want to learn more about support letters, we're going to link in the show notes. We have an episode that's all about writing support letters and how to get those done. So I'll throw a link to that in the show notes for you. So I want to name something that I think holds a lot of grant writers back, is the feeling that you're asking for favors. Because if you think about it, you're asking for partners to provide things, you're asking for support letters, you're asking people for information, and you don't want to push too hard because you'll seem demanding. I've been there before. I will say, I think a lot of it is how you ask for things. I got a quick story to share. I had worked with a colleague who wanted to try her hand at grant writing. And anytime a colleague was like, I want to help, I'm like, yes, I can always use the help. Right. And so she did, and she did she wrote her first grant. It was a federal grant. I kind of oversaw it, but I kind of guided her, do this and this, and this is how I do things. But I kind of left her to it. And so she did a great job and submitted it, and we ended up getting the grant. But I will say, after all of that, she was like, yeah, this is too much work. I don't ever want to do this again. So she wrote one and was done. But what was interesting is afterwards, one of the guys I worked with all the time, that was the easiest, dreamiest colleague to get information from, he came to me afterwards and was like, never again will I work with her as a lead grant person. And I was like, well, okay, well, what's going on? And he was like, she hounded me so much. And so I think part of asking for information is, you can't, yes, at some point you do sometimes have to get to hounding, but like if you ask for somebody for something on Monday, you need to be clear about your expectation about when you need that information, and you don't hound them the next morning going, where is this? If you weren't clear, unless they promise. There is that fine line of asking for information, and being reasonable about your request versus every day going, you haven't sent it to me, you haven't sent it to me, you haven't sent it to me, right? And you've probably worked with those people. I've got people I've worked with, they'll send an email, and if you haven't responded in 3 hours, they're at your desk going, why haven't you answered me yet? And you're like, I'm under deadline. I don't even know you sent me an email. Is it pressing? Well, it can wait. Then why are you at my desk, right? Yeah. So it is a fine line, I would say, of needing information but not being overly aggressive about it, right?
Right. But it's also, again, you're the nice one of the two of us, and then you've expressed that, like, I don't want them to think I'm bugging them. I don't want to seem demanding. And I'm like, this is we need this information for the grant. I'm not doing this for my health. Let's come on down. Let's get her done. I was in a client meeting the other day, and they were, it was a grant where this was the meeting about what is it that we're going to write about out of these 6 programs that you have, let's say. What is it that we're going to write about? And there was a lot of, well, there's this and there's that. I'm like, here's their funding history. And finally I was like, I can't pick this for you because I'm not there every day, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I know this is a tedious process, but before we leave this meeting, we got to know. I got to know if you want me to write this grant. I've got to know what it is that you want. And I I think maybe 20 years ago, I'd have been like, oh my God, that was too much. But I wasn't angry. I was speaking like I am now. I'm like, I get it. I know you've got a lot of things going on, but we have to have a focus. This deadline's coming up. We can't pull another meeting together. I got to know so that I can get you the stuff so that you can review it. Yeah. So here are the three things. Out of these three things, is there one that you feel like, gosh, we really do need that this year? And inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, what? Don't you know? And they did know, of course, but they had a lot of other demands on their time. And people don't hire consultants because everything is working perfectly.
No.
I can't speak for like corporate consultants. I've got thoughts and feelings about that. But I mean, I'm talking about grant and fundraising consultants. You don't get hired because everything is great.
Yeah.
You get hired to fill a gap or because there's a pain point. And so even though I'm not mean about it, I no longer think that I'm demanding, pushy, because you've got to have this done, and what you're doing is for the clients and the mission, and it's not you, but also you're sort of the conduit to make this happen. So I think if you're just starting out, or if you are a recovering people pleaser, the idea that you're demanding for wanting information to help the community that this agency serves, I think if you could just push that aside and go, no, it's vital that we get this done and get it right. And that's what you're bringing me in to do, whether you're hired or as a consultant. Yeah, I kind of feel like we could talk about this all day. And we had this whole other sidebar discussion about different tools. And I'm wondering if we should save that for another episode. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, because we could talk all day about tools. So let's talk about an episode.
Yeah, let's. We try to keep it down to. But yeah, if we segue into the tools that help people get it going, I feel like
okay. All right. A lot. So, hey, exciting news! We got an episode coming up about tools to help us get the information we need. So, part one. This is a part one-er, y'all. And I feel
like it could be, and it's there's so much to it, and I feel like not a lot of people talk about it. Or if they talk about it, it's just to go, I can never get the information I want. I'm like, I feel you, but maybe together, and there may be things that we haven't talked about, and you're listening to this one. Oh, you forgot that one. Let us know. Let us know at hello@haydayservices.com.
Well, I think the lesson here too is that we'll share some tools in a future episode that help us get the information. But the reality is, it doesn't matter how great your tools are, how often you use them. At the end of the day, it still is hard even with tools to get people to share the information in a timely manner. So what it really is
the communication.
It does boil down to communication and your ability to continue to follow up, even though it's annoying to do it for the 8th time, and understanding at what point do we either elevate it to their boss, or maybe you're working directly. Like I have a client, I work directly with the executive director. So are you elevating it to their board, or are you just going, until I get X, Y, and Z, we need to all be understanding that there are no grants going out. And, and again, as a client, as you being a consultant, that's also a question of, like the client I'm dealing with, I only get paid if I write grants for them. And so it's not costing them any money, right? Of them not giving me information. So there's no pain. There is pain because they won't have grants coming in, but they're not paying me every month a retainer for this, right?
Yeah. Well, the pain is that you're not making money off.
Getting paid. Now, this particular client is not like, I don't make a lot of money off of them. It's a local client that I love. I'm not doing it pro bono. They are paying me, but I barely make any money off of them, but I've been working with them for a long time. I love their work. They're easy. Until this year, super easy to work with. Right. So it's not costing me anything. And so, whether I stay with them or walk away, it's not going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't pay my mortgage. They're not that client at all. Never have been. Right. Which is why I've been a little more patient with them. But at the end of the day, it is about communication, and it is about you deciding how much can you take, whether as an employee or as a consultant, right? Like at what point do you walk away and go, this place, I'm not successful here. And it's not because I'm not a good grant writer, but it's because I cannot get the information I need in a timely manner, which means we're not getting as many grants out the door as we should, or we're not successful with all the grants because I don't have the information to write a successful proposal. And so it boils down to communication and your level of ability to put up with crap, I guess.
I think it also boils down to grant writing, again, it's a misnomer, right? What we're talking about this whole time is not about, oh, we need to build a better, we need to write more, we need to use active voice. It's an important part of grant writing that I wish someone had told me when I first started out you will need to get information from people who may not be able to give it to you in a timely fashion. So you need to learn how to communicate across many different media and many different ways to get the information you need. And that is just a part of your job. And I feel like it's important to focus on the technical aspects of grant writing and grant management, but communicate. And I hate it when people say it's a soft skill. It's a pretty hardcore skill. If you're a good communicator, it can go a long way. You can be technically the best grant writer ever, but if you piss everybody off, you're not going to be successful because you're not going to get the information you need. So, and I wanted to circle back and say, I love, Amanda, that you're earlier on in the pod today, you were talking about the importance of recognizing people. I think once the grant goes in, you need to recognize the people, and it's okay if they don't recognize you back.
Yeah.
As an employee, though, I think you might need to toot your own horn on that. But as a consultant, it's like, I am like, y'all, you submitted the most ridiculously difficult portal thing that has ever been created. This is another client. And if I were there, I would buy everyone, a cup of coffee or a beer or something like that. And I'm thinking of maybe sending balloons or something, or maybe something edible. Might be more appreciated, just because it was such hard work, and to just go, you did it, we did it together, go team.
Yep.
And because that's what it takes to get a grant out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we preach this all the time. Grant writing, grant management, grant work is not a solo sport. And, we can't do it without the subject matter experts and the executive directors and the colleagues and all the other people. Because if it was just us, we wouldn't have the information we need. No matter how good of a grant writer you are, we don't know everything about everything. I mean, heck, I've written grants about stormwater, about public safety, about diabetes programs. Trust me, I know enough to write grants about them now, but by no means am I an expert on any of those things after having written a grant about them. So you need your team.
We're in it together. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Grant Guru. If you want to learn more about this incredible new tool to the grant prospect research market, visit grantguru.com/US. You'll find a link in our show notes.
And remember, they are providing a 20% off discount code on your subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, enter the code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963. Well, y'all, if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with your colleagues, with a development director, a partner organization that may benefit from understanding why their grant writer keeps emailing them. The more people that understand how the process works, the better your life is going to be. And plus, we appreciate you sharing our work. So thank you for that.
And again, I'll say, if we didn't talk about something that has worked for you, a technique, a trick, something, hello@haydayservices.com, HayDay services.com. Let us know. Or find us on LinkedIn, or shoot us that email and let us know, because we want to learn too.
Absolutely. So, as always, we're honored you chose to spend time with us today. We hope you'll join us on our next episode, where we're talking to a funder who provides capacity building grants for their grantees, like lots of them. So we love their work, and we can't wait to share all of their information with you. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.